Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys football. The transfer portal window winding down. We saw kind of the last couple names trickle in. We're going to do a little transfer portal recap, give you our three biggest winners of the early transfer portal, three biggest losers, and then just some players to watch as we head into 2023 that are coming to new teams and players that might be really jolting their new team up. Again, before we get into it, I just want to say thank you to you guys. The transfer portal was an absolute wild month, and the support you guys have shown truly means a lot. We love talking roster construction at the college football level, and the transfer portal is playing a bigger and bigger role in that. So, again, appreciate you guys for supporting us, checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, that's the best way you can support the fellas. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Let's start with their transfer portal winners. First team that comes to mind here.
I mean, it's probably got to be Wisconsin for me. And just to start off with, like, what they did was they got every position they didn't have last year, and they went out and grabbed guys. Mordecai, CJ Williams. They got, like, good enough at the areas where they were so inept at that they had no chance of winning any games, that I think this year, around what they have in their nucleus is, like, defense and linemen and in those positions they've been good at for forever. I think they got the supporting cast now that can make some things happen around them.
I'm kind of pissed at you because that was going to be my third team I was going to say, and I thought I was going to take everyone by surprise, and then you just kind of stole the thunder. I couldn't agree more, though. And you look at what they did. They went out and got their quarterback of the president, Tanner Mordecai. And again, when he committed, like, I was super psyched about him because there hasn't been many quarterbacks that have been as impactful and as productive at the collegiate level than Tanner Mordecai. And he comes into an offense with Luke Fickell and Phil Longo running this offense that I think he's a perfect fit in. And then again, you mentioned the receivers. The personnel that they had on the roster in 2022, Phil Longo couldn't run an offense with. So what they did is they went to the transfer portal and got personnel and got players that were able to run this Phil Longo offense. And you got to feel very excited for this Wisconsin team as they transition away from the Paul Chryst era and kind of they're still going to be a physical team that likes to run the football with Braylon Allen, but you're going to see a lot more throwing. You're going to see a lot more spreading you out and throwing the pigskin around. And I thought they got the personnel to address that. And again, the commits aren't necessarily the flashiest or the biggest, but I do think with what Wisconsin wants to do, I think they got a lot better. Now, my team that kind of you have to talk about a little bit just because we've talked about them a lot is the Colorado Buffaloes. Again, Deion Sanders needed to overhaul this roster, and he did exactly that. Like, if Deion Sanders wants to win 6 games, he's going to 6 or more games, I should say. He needed significantly more talent on both sides of the football in Colorado. Again, this is a team that was 1-11 last year, one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the Power 5, and they go out and add a ton of guys who, again, outside of the Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders type guys, they're not necessarily the flashiest dudes, but they're Power 5 level guys who've played a lot. And you have to be really excited if you're a Colorado Buffalo fan and with what Deion Sanders was able to do in the transfer portal in the early window.
And that's the thing is he needed a big quantity of guys, and that's what he got. Because at the end of the day, you look at what they had last year, they didn't even really have the bones of a team that can be competitive. Unlike some of these other teams will address, like, again, you kick it back to a team like Wisconsin. They have the bones. They needed some wideouts, and they needed a quarterback, and they did it. Colorado, obviously, their approach had to be, we just need some guys who can play competitively at the Power 5 level. And obviously it's going to be headlined by Travis Hunter and Shedeur, but you're bringing in a good crop of guys who, again, are going to be ranked more like the 3-star, 4-star prospect kind of style, but at least they can play football on big-time teams.
And you got a nice mix of, like, the younger guys like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, guys who might be there for a while and can kind of be the framework of building this Colorado team. But you also got a lot of veterans. Jordan Dominic from Arkansas, Taylor Upshaw from Michigan, Leonard Payne on the defense line at Fresno State. Guys who have played a lot of college football who you're pretty confident are going to come in right away and be productive. So it was, like, in my mind, a nice blend of, like, young foundational guys like Travis Hunter, like Shedeur Sanders, combined with some guys who are veteran dudes who you're only going to get 1 year of eligibility out of.
But it'll give them a shot to be competitive right
Exactly.
away. That's going to be, I think, quite important to this team in this turnaround that Coach Prime is going to try to execute.
And again, we said this a lot. Coach Prime in his recruiting pitch, I think he has like the most important year one out of any of the head coaches because he's an unproven guy. A lot of media people would say, and if you're pitching to 4 and 5 stars like he has already been, like you got to show improvement. At the end of the day, 4 and 5 stars aren't going to want to come to a program that went 3 and 9 in 2023.
And again, that's not even so much him. That's just the job. That's Colorado starting from a point where they haven't been good in 20 years since Coach Bill, whatever his name was in the 90s with Cordero Stewart and that group of guys. So he's just starting from a place where if he doesn't get off to a hot start, it just feels like that'll be it's just a tougher place to turn around because they don't have the kind of the pedigree at this point, given how long it's been since they've been competitive, that some of the other schools do. So again, this class I think gives him a shot to kind of speed it along a little bit.
All right, our third team, and there was a lot of teams that got better. Like you see the teams towards the top of the rankings. LSU brought in a lot of really good players. I'm not necessarily going to pick them for a team that I think helped himself the most because they didn't seem like they got any guys. Well, they got plenty of guys who will be impact dudes, but that roster was already pretty good. Auburn, as good as they did through the transfer portal, like they didn't get a quarterback. And I thought that was one of their biggest misses. Like they needed a quarterback. They weren't able to get one. I'm going to go with my dark horse for next year, winning the ACC, potentially winning the college football playoffs in the Florida State Seminoles. You take a look at this class. I think it's a good blend of talented players as well as addressing positions of need. Again, you take a look at this class, a lot of good players coming into the program. I think headlined by guys like Fentrell Cypress, who immediately is going to impact this team in the back end. And you lost some players, but overall, I thought this team got a lot better, and I'm very excited to see what they can do in 2023.
Oh, and 100%. I think Florida State has had as good of an offseason as almost anyone. I mean, obviously getting Jordan Travis back, huge. Getting Jared Verse back, huge. And then, I mean, getting some of the positions they needed. I mean, and Jeremiah Byers, like, you look at that offensive line, it is still growing into kind of recovering from what had happened by the end of Jimbo Fisher's years, where it was so bad it almost like ruined the program, and they had to restart it. So just to add depth and get a guy, not that he's a depth guy, because he'll probably be one of their better players, but just hitting the positions they needed to hit and kind of heading in on the heels of the Jordan Travis news. I'm kind of with you. Florida State really had a good offseason, I thought.
And a guy like Jeremiah Byers is someone I'm hearing from like Florida State guys that is like a stud, like one of the best players in the transfer portal. And again, that offensive line I thought was good until they got banged up. And then like the lack of depth really reared its ugly head. And so even if a guy like Jeremiah Byers isn't going to start, where I think he will start, you still are building that depth on the offensive line, which was a position where they just didn't have any. And again, all that returning production, it seemed like they just topped it off with some really good talent. Jaheim Bell is going to be an absolute – I can't wait to see what Mike Norvell and that offensive coaching staff does with him, because I thought he was so poorly used at South Carolina last year. This dude is one of the more athletic freaks in college football, and like he's kind of wasted away at South Carolina. Like they didn't really know what to do with them. They were just like turning around and giving them handoffs. So I thought it was like a real misuse of talent. So very excited for Florida State too, Dill. Now let's turn to the teams that got probably hurt the most in the transfer portal season. First team here.
I mean, Texas A&M is probably the obvious one.
Has to be.
It's like to lose that many guys and guys who haven't even really gotten a shot yet, but came in. I mean, obviously everyone remembers their 2020 was it 21-2 class or it was
2 class.
It was really good, and you're losing a handful of guys there. You're losing a handful of 21s and just like big time talent players where it felt like something was off. I mean, to loot what I think they're like upwards of 25 guys. That feels like too many.
And you're not necessarily surprised because when they brought all that talent in, like there's going to be a squeeze out, and you combine that with really unsuccessful season, like I wouldn't want to use the word pathetic, but it got ugly. It got really ugly. You're not necessarily surprised, but again, it's a lot of guys that it wasn't necessarily to the point you think of guys like Chris Marshall and Anthony Lucas from that 2022 class. Those guys weren't necessarily busts. They just transferred out. And so when you lose that many dudes that it's not like you missed on them. It's not like you didn't recruit on, like you missed either recruiting evaluations or you missed player development wise. It's just guys that left the program because it seems to be a program that is kind of withering away a little bit. I'll give you another one that it has to be like red alarms is Oklahoma State. I mean, there was a day, and I forget what day it was. I think it was like early January, where I got on Twitter like 15 notifications of Oklahoma State guys transferring out of that program. Mike Gundy's obviously had like a checkered past with some of the in locker room type
relationship building. He's had his share of controversies for sure.
And like they brought some guys in, but it didn't really balance out, losing like half of your roster. And this is a really interesting team to kind of take a look at in 2023, because if there's a coach that just keeps on winning football games, I think Mike Gundy is like one of the more impressive coaches when it comes to beating Vegas' spreads. Like he's one of the more successful coaches to put your money behind, because like the personnel might not match up, and Vegas and the power numbers are saying this team isn't good. And they just keep on winning football games. Mike Gundy's done a tremendous job at that. But this is like shockingly concerning. Like you lose like your wide receivers that you were really excited about. You lose a Spencer Sanders at your quarterback who he didn't even go to the draft. He just entered the transfer portal. You don't really know what this team's going to look like in 2023. And in my opinion, it's a team to monitor.
And they really didn't retool it either.
No.
Just like they lost a bunch of guys and they didn't really get anything back. I mean, there was teams like LSU turned it over a fair amount. LSU lost a lot of transfers. They got a lot of transfers. Yeah. And it balanced out. Like Colorado is going to be in the same boat. They're going to have a lot of guys leave, but they're obviously bringing in a fresh new group. So these teams, it's not necessarily bad to lose a ton of guys in the portal, but like you also got to replace it. And obviously Oklahoma State didn't really do that.
And like the concerning part was it was like solid players that you feel good about, like Trace Ford, a guy that contributed for a really long time at Oklahoma State. Mason Cobb, your best linebacker from last year. Mentioned Spencer Sanders, also transferring out. Jabir Muhammad, one of your best cornerbacks, also transferring to Washington. Like good players leaving the program. And there was kind of like a head-scratching reason why, and maybe it was just Mike Gundy. Now I want to flip to, let's take a peek at some of like the players that you're most excited about. Dill, we'll pick 5 players. Let's do 2 quarterbacks, and then let's pick, because you obviously gravitate to the quarterbacks. And then we'll pick 3 position players, non-quarterback players, I should say, that are going to make the biggest impact in 2023. And what I'll say to the listeners is we're going to put in some work and make an all-transfer team, like a whole team where we think are going to be the most impactful transfers at one spot. Dill, I'm going to kick it to you for the quarterbacks. Most impactful quarterback heading to a new team in 2023 here.
I gotta say Tanner Mordecai for me, just
because
where they started, and I think you make a very similar argument for Shedeur Sanders, frankly, because the Colorado quarterback play was really weak, so you're maybe splitting hairs. But I think I kind of feel like Wisconsin is about a quarterback away from probably being pretty good. Obviously, Colorado's got a fair amount to turn over, which is probably why I put in terms of just pure impact, I'd probably give it to Mordecai. But again, you just look at how close they were and how kind of much Graham Mertz has struggled for the past few years. I think putting Mordecai on a guy you kind of know is going to have a more steady hand and be a little more comfortable throwing the ball a fair amount, where Graham Mertz, when there's no running game, there is no offense on that team. So that's probably to me. And what that Wisconsin team is going to want to do with the new offensive coordinator, that Phil Longo, that to me is a number.
I agree. Like Phil Longo, there's no better quarterback to run that Phil Longo offense than Tanner Mordecai, because you're right. He's used to throwing the ball 50 to 60 times a game. And I can't wait to see Braylon Allen without an 8-man box. So you watched the Wisconsin games last year. Nobody was fearing Graham Mertz through the air. And so you were seeing loaded boxes where Braylon Allen was doing what he could, but he's not Superman. And so you seen Braylon Allen with some lighter boxes with teams that maybe playing 2 or 3 high safety, kind of trying to stop this air raid offense. Braylon Allen's gonna go to work. And so Tanner Mordecai, you couldn't really think of a better fit for that Phil Longo offense and what Wisconsin's trying to do than a dude like Tanner Mordecai, who's proven that he can do it. I'm going to go Sam Hartman coming from Wake to Notre Dame. It was probably one of the bigger storylines in the transfer portal. And I'm kind of sick and tired of the Sam Hartman respect because at one point I was lower on Sam Hartman than it seemed like most of the national media was. And now for some reason, like people are saying Sam Hartman's not good. And I get it. Sam Hartman probably won't be an NFL quarterback. He'd probably be a guy that sticks around as a backup, but he's not a legit quarterback prospect at the next level. That doesn't mean he's a bad college football quarterback. You look back the last 2 seasons, his numbers are as good as any quarterbacks in the country on a team at Wake Forest that, to be quite frank, they've had some nice wide receivers, but that talent ain't that much. And Sam Hartman was piecing the teams up in the ACC. He goes to Notre Dame where what's been their biggest hole for a very long time, an elite quarterback. I think Sam Hartman, one, is going to be the best quarterback we've seen at Notre Dame in a very long time. And two, the biggest concern you had with Notre Dame was unlocking those wide receivers. Like all the Notre Dame fans that listen to us, they keep telling us the talent's there. Drew Pine wasn't a guy that could get those wide receivers cooking. Sam Hartman can do that, and I think he's a perfect bridge quarterback for whether it's Buckner, whether it's CJ Carr in 2024.
Yeah, I'm totally, again, that goes to where they did not play good enough quarterback at Notre Dame last year, obviously.
No.
Has seen some moments of Tommy Reese in the press box.
Buckner just wasn't ready. And so I think Sam Hartman's like a nice guy that, hey, we're going to have Sam Hartman in here. Buckner, if you're the guy, you might be ready by year 4, but you clearly weren't ready in year 2, and you're not that optimistic.
It's also a good team around him. So it's like Sam Hartman can have very immediate impact, even though Notre Dame didn't really do much else in the transfer portal. But it's not a bad team. They just weren't good enough at quarterback. And again, it's not all quarterback at Notre Dame, but they have a roster around Hartman that I think he can be competitive right away and really take that team from a team that could lose a game to Marshall or almost lost one to Cal to a team that's going to be very competitive at the top end of their schedule.
Yeah, okay. So moving away from the quarterback position, where are you going for some impact dudes that aren't quarterbacks that will be significantly impacting their ball club in 2023 here?
So I think the biggest one of all, or not the biggest, but one of my bigger ones at the non-quarterback is going to be DeSean McCullough, just because you saw how much Oklahoma struggled in the past. And I get their secondary is young and gave up some plays, but they didn't have that alpha dog pass rusher as much as you would have thought. I think you thought it could have been Marcus Stripling and number 40. Is it Ethan
Downs, who's a stud. I like Ethan Downs.
But again, I'm not sure that he's a great on the edge pass rusher. So I think DeSean McCullough gives them a shot to be a really premier pass rusher on the edge and allow Ethan Downs to play more his game, where you move him around the line and let him work in a variety of different spots where you know you're going to have a guy winning on the edge with McCullough.
And one of the things that I don't think people talk about enough during the transfer portal is like the amount of years of eligibility these teams or these players have. Because again, a guy like Sam Hartman, you're only getting for 1 year. DeSean McCullough, I believe, was a true freshman last year in Indiana. At the oldest, he was a second-year dude. I believe he was a true freshman. So he's going to be there for multiple years. He's a guy that – so it was his true freshman year. He's a guy that you can build around. And, again, a lot of the guys at the top end of the transfer portal are only guys like Devin Leary, Sam Hartman, are only guys that are going to be there for 1 year. DeSean McCullough is a guy that you're going to get, and he's going to be productive for multiple years and impact that ball club year 1. Now, the guy I'm going with, and it's maybe a little bit chalky here, but I really, really do like Travis Hunter because I think, and I get it, it's like, I was like, yeah, we know about Travis Hunter. One, you just talked about it. He's going to be there for probably only 2 more years because he's probably going pro after his 3rd year. But he's a guy that's going to play on both sides of the ball, I think. And you're going to see like Kermani McLean and Travis Hunter be absolute lockdown at the cornerback position and potentially be a number 1 overall pick or a top 5 pick in the 20. Let me do my math real quick. In the 2025 NFL draft or 2024 NFL draft. 2025.
Too much.
Do my math real quick there. But he's also going to be a guy that this team is desperate for talent on both sides of the ball. I guarantee you Coach Prime is going to give him some work on the offense side of the ball, kind of like what Jabril Peppers did at Michigan, but potentially even more because this is a team that is starving for playmakers on the offense side of the ball. There's probably not going to be a more, and I get he's number 1 for a reason. There's not going to be a guy outside of quarterbacks is going to impact their ball club more than Travis Hunter in
But
Colorado.
the other thing for him is he's a bit of a culture changer at Colorado. I mean, for a guy of his ilk, and again, he was that way at Jackson State too, but to follow Coach Prime and believe in that message, I think he blazes the trail for the next crop of big-time players to not look at Colorado as the old Colorado. And again, Coach Prime, he's changing the culture himself for sure, but he does still need some big-time players to go there and believe and buy in. And obviously, to an extent, Shador was always going to go there probably just because father-son. But to win the Travis Hunter, like, get him back on board with Coach Prime at Colorado, I think it's just big for moving that culture forward and getting the big dogs to believe in what they're doing.
And I love Travis Hunter, and he's probably the most excited.
Because it would have been alarming if he didn't follow. I think you would have been maybe like,
agree, but you heard Georgia, Florida, like all those teams were making pushes for him when he hit the transfer portal, and he said like there's potentially like he's listening to other deals.
Yeah,
and he followed Coach Prime. Still one more guy, non-quarterback, that's going to be making big time impact in 2023 here for you.
Well, I think Jordan Burch is going to be huge because they are, and that's just a one that they're losing a lot. I think they're losing the two kind of main edge rusher guys, and they needed to fill that in. And again, this feels like another coach who needs to kind of get it going and start being competitive for the Big Ten title or Pac-12 title. Sorry, just because you can't go that many years of not being big if you want to start winning national titles. So I think that in terms of the amount of turnover that's going on in the Oregon roster and what they needed to bring in, they needed to have someone who can rush the passer. And I think Jordan Burch will give them that chance because they really didn't have much else besides him.
And I'm extremely, it's like we talked about it when Jordan Burch committed. I was like, if there's no doubt Dan Lanning recruited him during his time in Athens, Georgia. But if there's a defensive-minded dude and a defensive coordinator type guy like Dan Lanning that can bring out the best in Jordan Burch, it's Dan Lanning. And again, it's South Carolina. Like, this dude came in as a top 10 national recruit, bona fide 5-star, never really developed it and reached his full potential in his 3 years at South Carolina. He heads over to Oregon. Like, the sky's the limit for this cat. Like, we could be talking in 2024 of him being a first-round draft pick because that's how athletically gifted he is. You pair him up with a coach like Dan Lanning, who is great at developing guys on the defense side of the ball. When you think about all those defensive linemen he put into the NFL during his time at Georgia, it's an extremely exciting fit. And again, a position of need when you lose guys like DJ Johnson to the NFL draft. The last guy I'm going to go with, and I'm going to go down the rankings a little bit for him. Give me Marshawn Lloyd going to South Carolina, or going from South Carolina to the other
USC.
In Southern California. Marshawn Lloyd, I was ready to put him as a top 10 running back in my draft rankings. His storyline, you got to keep in mind, bad knee injury, struggled to stay healthy, comes into his second year. He was clearly not healthy. And then last year, when he was healthy, was absolutely electric. I mean, this is a guy that can run hard between the tackles, but also has extreme burners to just hit that home run ball. You lose Travis Dye. I think Marshawn Lloyd comes in and is arguably the best running back in the Pac-12, and he was running behind a South Carolina offensive line that was not very good. He's going to be running behind a much better USC offense and offensive line. There's going to be more space for him to work for. I'm extremely excited to see what he can do, and I know this is early, and I know this kind of sounds crazy when Caleb Williams just won the Heisman last year. If Marshawn Lloyd gets the work that I think he can handle, he's a guy that's going to be, I think we're going to be talking about like rushing for 1,500 yards at USC because I think he's an absolute horse.
You're worried about backfield though, Jay.
Huh?
Yeah, a little bit of crowd in that backfield.
Malik Brown. I mean, that's okay. Brown. That might be premature. But I do love Marshawn Lloyd.
I don't even think you want running backs to go 1,500 anymore. You probably want like two guys to go 1,000 and one to go 15 and the other to go 300.
That's probably fair. I'm just so happy for Marshawn Lloyd because at South Carolina, like he was their offense, especially when Spencer Rattler was struggling. And the shame part of it is he was banged up for when Spencer Rattler actually in that passing offense decided to put it together. And he was facing 7-8 man boxes and doing damn good things behind a South Carolina offensive line that stunk. Like you're seeing light boxes with a decent, I think this USC offensive line with the transfers they've added will be pretty solid. It was very good last year. I think it'll continue to be good in 2023. I'm very excited to see what Marshawn Lloyd can do. That'll do it. We're running on 25 minutes again. We appreciate you guys supporting the channel. Let us know in the comment section what draft or transfer guys, I'm got my mind in draft mode here, what transfer guys we need to add to our notebooks heading into 2023. Dig into your notes again. We appreciate you guys. The reason we do it is to talk ball with you guys in the comment section. So light it up down there. Again, we appreciate you. And again, if you do enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.